I've wanted to talk about this for a while because I think that it's something that is heavily misunderstood, and I also wanted to shed light on the topic because of how it has personally impacted me and my life. I originally had a different topic planned for this week, but this particular topic is feeling more present in my mind, and I'm feeling like I want to talk about it, and usually I don't, so I'm taking this opportunity to finally kind of open up about it. I've shied away from speaking about this because of this fear of how people will perceive me or view me after kind of talking about it, but I am ready to finally get into all of it. In February of this year, I was diagnosed with OCD, something that beforehand I really didn't know anything about. A couple of months after moving to LA, I started to struggle with things that I had never experienced in my life. There were thoughts that were sticking around longer than usual, new fears arising, this idea that certain things weren't safe for me anymore. And life overall was just starting to become very uncomfortable. And I could not figure out why. I thought for a long period of time that I was just losing my mind from how much time I was spending by myself, and that if I just started to get out and socialize that these issues would go away, but they didn't. And it wasn't until talking to a friend of mine that the word OCD kind of came into the picture. As he explained his experiences, my entire view of OCD shifted, and I realized that I might have found my answer. The American Psychiatric Association describes OCD as a disorder in which people have reoccurring unwanted thoughts, ideas, or sensations. These are called obsessions. To get rid of these thoughts, they feel driven to do something repetitively. These are compulsions. I was starting to understand that OCD was not what society had kind of made it out to be all these years. It was not someone who just really liked to have their place organized. It was someone like me, which I want to say after almost 10 months of getting my diagnosis, hearing people use OCD in this adjective form to describe their organizational habits is one of the most invalidating things ever. Myself and others who have this diagnosis are quite literally terrorized every single day by our thoughts. For me, personally, OCD felt like every single day I was trying to prevent death. And when I would slip up or miss something, I was filled with this horrible anxiety that these might be my last moments on this earth. I wish at times I was better about calling people out on their miseducation about the topic, but I'm hoping that maybe through this episode I can kind of shed light on the issue and just kind of do some of that in a way. There had been hints of some OCD tendencies and thoughts in my childhood, but nothing that ever really stood out to me or my family. And it wasn't until I was fully on my own that all of these things started to heighten, and it was becoming scary to even get up each day. It felt like out of nowhere my brain had completely altered. My OCD in particular revolves around a certain food allergy that I have. I've had this allergy my whole life, but I never really felt threatened by it until this past year or so. Everything became so scary to me. I was cutting things out of my diet because of this fear of an allergic reaction and this idea that I might die if I'm unable to get myself help. I thought that being on my own made the risk of death so much higher, and if this situation played out, I would end up dying alone because I moved to LA. I was away from all of my friends and family. And so this fear was just constantly hovering over top of me that like, okay, if something happens, you're going to have to deal with this by yourself. And if you can't, you're going to die by yourself here. I stopped going to restaurants entirely because it just felt extremely unsafe for me. I was viciously cleaning my apartment and belongings with this fear that somehow things have been contaminated with this allergen. I got to a point where even the food that I had at home didn't feel safe for me, and I was going many days on end with without really eating anything at all. I would wash my hands over and over again, or wash my belongings after other people came into contact with them, or if I was at someone else's house. My brain was working overtime trying to analyze every single possible threat that could come to me and working to try and prevent all of those things from happening. My life just became miserable. It felt like my life had stopped. There was very little that I was allowing myself to do. I got to a point where I pretty much just stopped leaving the house because it just seemed like too much. OCD had taken everything from me, and there was very little that I was enjoying in life anymore. I got to a point where I had these terrible thoughts that would enter my head, and I would debate putting an end to my suffering. I was scared of death, yet there I was debating it. I thought, okay, if this is my overall fear, why don't I just be in control of this? Because I can't live like this. This is terrible. I was going through so much hell just trying to even do the mundane things in life that I was just physically and mentally exhausted. And there was many days where I was just like, I'm done. I'm done doing this. I don't want to do this anymore. This is unenjoyable. I'm not living this life that I want to live. My friends and family were coming to visit me so often because they were just worried of what might happen if I was alone any longer. That is a really hard thing to go through yourself, and a very hard thing to put your loved ones through. I felt terrible upsetting my mother, and she was very scared that she might lose me, and I know it was hard for her, but I couldn't stop myself from thinking the way that I was. It's very hard to explain this, and I'm trying my best to do so, but if you understand what I'm talking about or you have experienced these things, I am very, very sorry. I would not wish OCD on my worst enemy. It has 100% been the hardest thing I've had to deal with in my life. As things progressed, it became very hard for me to make new relationships with people. I was scared to meet someone new and have to tell them about my OCD. And I felt like I couldn't hide my OCD because my compulsions were so embedded into all of my actions. I was literally embarrassed of my allergy and embarrassed of my OCD, which is an impossible hill to get over because neither of those things are going away. The few times I did hang out with new people, I was exhausting myself trying to come up with excuses as to why I couldn't go out to dinner or why I was doing the strange things that I was. I would attempt to hide my compulsions, which over time just felt like too much, so I decided that it was better to just not be around people at all. The most frustrating part for me was the fact that I had not dealt with these things before. I was sitting there constantly comparing myself to this past version of myself that would go to restaurants and try new things, drink after people. This Devin who wasn't excessively cleaning everything. The Devin who didn't have cracked hands from how much she was washing them. The Devin who left the house. I was so angry every single day that these things had been taken from me out of nowhere, and I couldn't comprehend how my brain had altered so fast. I got my diagnosis from a therapist here in LA, and I started seeing her once a week, and I still do. It is the only way I have been able to navigate this. And some weeks are better than others, and some weeks it feels like everything is crashing down and I'm back at square one. But little by little, the days are getting better if you take the ratio of it. I've made a lot of strides in working against these fears, and I'm proud of that. I won't say that I have gotten everything back into my life that I used to enjoy, but it is a process, and I feel like I'm on the path now to reclaiming my life. OCD therapy is typically in the form of ERP, which is exposure and response therapy. And it involves gradually exposing yourself to the fear in a controlled environment and using coping skills to stop the compulsion. And it's not an easy method. It definitely does not feel like your normal talk therapy. It is difficult having to intentionally put yourself in a very distressing situation and not do the actions that you believe will make you feel better. But through this, I have started to find relief, and I have realized how much of a change it has made just in my everyday actions. And I'm not going to get into all of the details of what this treatment involves or the different coping mechanisms, because I am not a licensed therapist or psychologist, and I don't want to pretend that I am. If you feel like you are struggling with these things, it is best if you get a professional evaluation and diagnosis and work with the people who specialize in this every single day. I more wanted to share my own personal story because it is such a big part of who I am and where I'm at now. I wanted to share this in hopes of letting people know that you are not alone in this, and your suffering does not have to be silent. A couple of weeks ago, I was watching a influencer's YouTube video, someone who I look up to and enjoy their content, and they briefly opened up about their own struggles with OCD. And it was mind-blowing to me that someone who I saw as perfect was dealing with the same diagnosis as me. They didn't even get into the full details of it or share their exact story, but I had never felt so seen just from a couple of words towards the topic. And if I can give that to someone else, then I feel like I've done my job. Because when I got my diagnosis, there was only one other person that I knew that struggled with OCD. And it was amazing getting to talk to that person and just say, wow, you understand exactly where I'm at and why I'm scared of the things that I am and why I'm doing the things that I do. And it's not even along the lines of having the same obsessions and the same compulsions, but it's just that root of, I understand why you're doing this and I struggle with it too, and we can get through this together. And as time has gone on, I've found more people that struggle with OCD, and that has made things a lot easier for me. OCD is one of those diseases that can be really debilitating, and it can be very isolating. And at times you feel like you've absolutely lost it. And through meeting other people that struggle with the same things as I find more strength to be able to work to overcome this. I've opened up about many things in the past, but my struggles with OCD was something that I was avoiding for a very long time. I put it off with this fear of people thinking that I was crazy, or not even attempting to understand how my brain works. But through hearing other stories, I realize how important it is to talk about this. And it is slowly getting easier for me. These fears are not seeming so heavy anymore, and I'm getting more comfortable with this idea that I don't know what's going to happen. And I'm not going to spend every single day trying to prevent my fears from taking place, because I've seen so much of my life and the things that I care about be stripped away from me, and I don't want to continue on like that. For those of you out there dealing with OCD, anxiety, depression, or even just life struggles, please know that you are not alone, and it will get better. Until next time, you guys.